Good morning, everybody. Today is March 23rd, and we are here for going over another market update. Let me just get one thing done here. And so there's a decent slug of information coming out today. I'll just start by saying that Powell is going to be giving some testimony today before Congress with regards to the state of the economy. So that should be, I think, at about, I think it's 11 Central Standard Time. And so, I'll be sure to keep track of that because it does impact the financial markets, which impacts how I make decisions in the markets. So I do tend to, if I don't watch it, I try to read the transcript. I tend to watch things at twice the speed, market update. And so I will be glad to share my thoughts with regards to what comes out of that testimony today, because it's going to say a lot about the state of things to come in the upcoming 6 to 12 months, etc. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. The other thing that's pretty disturbing, we both know that there's a lot of money printing going on by the Fed, and I know there's some people that are concerned that all this printing is going to cause the economy to collapse. I do not believe that is the case. I will do videos explaining why that's the case. I don't think it's going to be something I'll be able to do in a single video. I'll have to maybe do it in stages. But I'm more. If there was two bets I need, if there was like one bet between who's going to collapse first, cryptocurrencies or the U.S. economy, I think it's pretty obvious, or it should be to most people, which one's going to collapse first: the coin flipping winner or the strongest economy the world has ever seen. I think I'm going to go with the coin flipping winner. And once again, with regards to coin flipping, for anybody who's heard what I said with regards to coin flipping contest, this is from a reference that Warren Buffett gave in a book called The Intelligent Investor. He wrote, I think it was back in 1984. I think it was that copy. He turned around and wrote the introduction because Benjamin Graham was his professor at Columbia, had a huge impact on him. And when it was, I think it was the 50-year anniversary. I think that book was written in 1934, if I'm not mistaken. When that happened, Buffett wrote the story about the chimpanzees, and I want to just kind of give you this reference. So he basically said, I want you to imagine there was two groups of chimpanzees or monkeys in the country, and they were at two different zoos. And what they did is there were some people got this bright idea. Actually, there might have been more than two groups, but let's have like 1 million monkeys flip quarters. And the monkeys that end up flipping heads or flipping tails, the most times, we're going to think they're smarter than everybody else, all the other monkeys. And this was a great analogy because he basically said, before you know it, the monkeys that flip 20 quarters, 20 heads in a row, they would have press releases and they would have interviews. There'd be people flying in from around the world to meet these monkeys because I don't know how they had this talent to flip 20 quarters in a row because, people don't realize the odds are the odds that at some point mathematically it is possible for something to happen like that where there's 20 flips in a row, even though each subsequent flip is still a 50% chance of it occurring. So at the end of, just for example, 5 flips at 0.5 times 0.5, 3%, there's a 3% chance that if you flip a quarter 5 times, or if you flip a quarter 100 times, 3 of those 100 times, there's a chance that you'll flip it 5 identical ways, heads or tails. Okay, so that's the way it works out. Now that same math, if you go out 10 times, I hope I don't screw this up. It drops to like 2 out of 1,000. Okay, so 2 out of 1,000 flips will come up with 10 heads in a row. And then it gets really goofy. And, and I guess my point is, with regards to, Bitcoin, I kind of I kind of think of it, as well as these cryptos, from the standpoint of flipping quarters. That, mathematically, there's something around us that can have a coin flipping experience. We're fascinated by it. A lot of people give it more credit than is due, and some people actually chase it, which is very fascinating indeed. This is why I have no opinion on going long or going short, because I don't like to put money on the line when it's literally just a coin flip. That's not what I do for myself. I don't do that for clients. I need to think I have better odds than just a coin flip before I put money to work. Otherwise, I think it's just outright gambling. And so I think that that's just something to think about, folks. Okay. Well, with regards to Yellen, let me just talk about what she briefly said. She's hinting that the economy is still slow and that we need more money to help strengthen things up, because we have capacity and interest rates are low. Since interest rates are low, we can afford to continue to expand the balance sheet of the country and spend this money. Okay? So here's the deal. I mentioned this before. There's a library that, I live in a town of about 25,000 people. And we had a library that was just fine, that was probably worth $3 million. Okay? $3 million for this library, super cozy, little nooks and so forth. And, it's funny because the people that are paying the bill for a lot of these libraries are working during the day, and the library likes to close early when people are coming home from work. So it's kind of aggravating and annoying for taxpayers. And I'm surprised there isn't more outrage about when the library is open. The library should be open for the people that are actually footing the bill. But a lot of library hours across the country are not set up as such, and private sector companies are far more accommodative to people that actually pay the damn bill. So that's just a side note. But going back to this $3 million library, now let's assume, for example, municipal bonds were back. This is crazy, folks. There's a lot of you may not remember this, but let's just assume they were at 5%. And I remember when municipal bonds were 5%, tax-free money, 5%. Wow, that was a long time ago. This is probably in the mid 90s, I think, 25 years ago. You can receive 5% for no risk, tax-free. So every $1 million, you got 50 G's. Okay, try to go find those 5% tax-free bonds now. It's not happening. So with regards to a $3 million library, let's assume that the municipal government had to pay 5% on that money. And this all ties into Yellen, folks. And believe it or not, she's in charge of Treasury. So right now she's in charge of the U.S. Treasury, trying to convince Biden, to convince Congress, to convince the American public, come on, let's just keep spending. We're fine. And I am totally against it. I think it's a disaster. It can lead to a disaster, but not a crash. I don't think the whole economy is going to unwind because of it, but I do think it's going to cause a lot of pain and a lot of, very much so a hangover of sorts. Okay, so the 5% number on a $3 million library, that's $150,000 in carry and interest, right? Because you got to still pay the principal back, folks. You got to pay the $3 million, but let's just assume, simplicity's sake, it's $150,000. Okay, so now all of a sudden, when you're at $150,000, it's not exactly, but about $500 a day in interest for this library if rates are 5%. Okay, to be more exact, it's $410.96 per day to carry the library. But you still need to pay back the $3 million. And I'm not talking about operating expenses or anything. This is strictly just the building and so forth. So now all of a sudden, let's assume municipal rates drop to 1.5%, just for this example's sake. And so all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is great, Bobby. Rates are 1.5%. We could afford $150,000 of interest per year, $411 per day for this old library. Let's go spend $10 million to buy one, because it's only $150,000 in interest. And on the surface is like, wait a second, I could pay $3 million or I could pay $10 million, but I pay 1.5% versus 5%. Which one's better for society longer term? And what I would say, to keep capital in check and to keep overreach of government and excess spending and excess grab of assets in a society. I think rates higher it starves government from doing stupid shit. Okay, sorry I'm swearing, but because now all of a sudden we agreed as a society we can afford $150,000 in interest, and we could pay it on 5% bonds or we could pay it on 1.5% bonds. But now in one scenario we owe $3 million, and the other one we owe $10 million. So you ask yourself a simple question: which one would you rather be in? Which situation? Would you rather be in a situation where you're paying a higher interest rate but you owe less money? Or would you rather pay a much lower interest rate but you still have to pay that principal back? Because if you don't, as long as you have that principal that you owe, you're a slave. Let's cut to the chase. You owe that money. And now you're at massive risk, because what if rates go up? What if you don't, now granted some of these bonds are longer term, but if rates, this is a long play, folks. If they know that in the future, one of two things has to happen. Either that note has to be paid off somehow, or if rates spike and the person can't repay it, i.e. a community can't pay off that building, the creditors take the building. So the taxpayers have nothing to show for it. They just paid all that interest, and then they take these sons of bitches take the building. And this is called debt. There's debt diplomacy or this debt predatory lending that took place overseas in this, around the world by corrupt countries, and in particular the Chinese Communist Party did this crap for years. Debt diplomacy has hit the U.S. soil on a local community level as well as on a statewide level, and this is the way they're playing it. They're making it seem as though low interest rates, the water's warm. Don't worry, come on in. Everything is going to be fine. And so this is my big concern, that we should refuse. There should be some type of mechanism in place that the overall debt capacity relative to the assets of the community, of individuals that owe the money, should be somehow moved. It should be tied, and it should be in lockstep. Because on a community of 25,000 like that I live in, it's probably, there's more kids than average in my community versus other parts of the country. So let's assume there's 6,500 families in both situations, and that means that $3 million, that's $461 of debt. Just for that library building, the old one, assuming it was fully. There was still a mortgage on it. I don't think there was, but let's assume there was, just for the argument's sake. So 465. So the $10 million one, the 6,500 families, all of a sudden they owe $1,500. So now all of a sudden it's not a $400 or whatever for something. It's $1,500 that's owed per family, and that's you got to remember. The library isn't the only thing these families in the community use. So for the community to spend that much for the library, then you got to look at the fire department. They got all the bells and whistles on that. Then you got the police department. And so this is the kind of crap that we, the people, need to stop. Now, the way we're going to stop it is through math, and we're going to stop it through common sense. And hopefully, over time, as I'm doing some of this other stuff, part of my whole process, I'm going to be going through all the Arizona data for this 2.1 million ballot audit. As some of you may know, I'm doing that for my charitable work. And one of the other things that I'm working on nationwide, and this stuff is super tedious, folks, because you got to remember, I still have, when you're doing something for free, you got to remember, you get the time that comes with the free. I don't commit all my time to it, but I will say that I'm committing a lot more time than the average person in the country. How's that? So it's somewhere in between those two numbers. And so one of the goals, as I kind of finish up on some of my projects that I'm working on with this, is I want to do this across the nation, like all this data, and figure out how to create alternative data sets for the American public to use across all 3,143 counties and county equivalents in this country. and start to create these frameworks where I just open source it. I'm like, look, guys, we're all in this together. Here we go. Use the templates, and all I ask is, if I create this stuff and I take the time to set it all up, and I don't want to charge for it, that people, they don't have a right to charge for it either. So if you want to help with the process and create stuff, and you're using my creation of sorts, the agreement is going to need to be, when I roll this stuff out, that it's all public. And now, if you use some of the ideas to create your own ideas off the ideas, I don't care about that. But if I'm going to build out some of these systems and share them with the world, I want to kind of make it almost like a public utility of sorts. And in fact, I'm exploring this from the standpoint of some things I may patent or trademark, and then kind of put it in a trust on behalf of the American people. So that's something that I've been wrapping my mind around, like, how would I do that? Because if I'm going to do this for the next 5-10 years or longer, and I'm willing to do it as my charitable giving, I sure as heck don't want somebody else to get paid on it excessively or something. I don't mind people getting paid for their time if they're doing work, but to get paid excess rents on something they didn't create, that would just piss me off. And so, anyways, that's where we're at with that. Okay, so now let's talk about the current account deficit. So we talk about interest rates. And by the way, for everybody that's worried about the crash and everything else, now I don't think there's going to be a crash. I have a very strong mathematical reason and logic is to tell you there isn't going to be a crash in the financial markets of this country, and assets aren't going to come tumbling down as much as everybody thinks. But in tribute of all the bears out there, whether you guys realize you're bears or not, it's a very bearish sentiment. I'm wearing my bear shirt. You see that? This is the King Bear. Anyways, I love this shirt. When I saw it, only someone that loves the markets would probably buy something like this shirt. Nobody else would buy it. But if you notice, the bear has a crown. Anyways, I wore that shirt because I hear all this doom and gloom. And no joke, sometimes I wear the bear shirt when I'm bullish. It's like a contra indicator. And I did have a bull sweater for a while, right? This big bull on the sweater, and I would wear it when I was bearish. Anyways, I don't want people to know which way I'm thinking. Okay, current account deficit, folks. That number came out for the fourth quarter. That number came out at $188.5 billion. Okay, so what does that mean? $188.5 billion. Now let's run the math on this. Oftentimes you might have heard in the press that we've lost 3 million jobs, right? 3 million jobs because of outsourcing manufacturing to China and other nations. And a lot of people throw these numbers out and they have no idea how they're computed. And so I'll give you a quick little framework that you can think about. The average job in this country, with no multiplying effect, folks, the average manufacturing job, that is, retail is different. Retail, the average job might have $100,000 in revenue per employee. The average manufacturing job in this country probably has about $250,000 of revenue per employee. So if maybe everybody should have their calculator out and they could go along with some of this. But anyways, I already computed it, but I'll just compute it again step by step. So if $250,000 goes into $1 million 4 times, right? So easy enough. And there's 1,000 million in a billion. So 4 goes into a million. 250,000 goes into a million 4 times. So a million goes into a billion 1,000 times. So that's 4 times 1,000 is 4,000. So each $1 billion of trade deficit is about 4,000 jobs. That's one way to think about it. 4,000 jobs. So every $1 billion we send overseas, and we're having other people in other countries do that work for us in the manufacturing side of things, it's about 4,000 jobs. Now keep in mind, these 4,000 jobs guess what? They like to spend money too. So if somebody's working and they're getting paid for that job, and let's just say they make 50 grand a year, because that's the average person in the manufacturing sector of the U.S. economy makes probably $800 to $1,000 a week. So if the average American's making, we'll just round it up to $1,000 a week, all in with benefits, they make $1,000 a week. That's 50 grand. They're going to probably spend 45,000 of that 50, assuming they have a 10% savings rate. We know most people do not have a 10% savings rate, so they might spend even more than that. So then there's this thing called the multiplier effect. So each of those jobs in the community, they're paying taxes in their community because they go buy food at the grocery store, they go to restaurants, whatever. Everybody, there's this multiplier effect. And maybe what I'll do is I'll map that out, just like some quick assumptions later. Okay. So now, 4,000 jobs per billion. Now, our deficit, okay, the total deficit for the fourth quarter was 188.5 billion. So I want to give you guys some perspective on this. So 188.5 is 754,000 jobs. That's what it comes out to. Just that's how many jobs it's costing us. And then when you look at that number for the entire thing, you're talking about 3 million plus jobs. This concept, I'm not sure who's saying, Craig, I don't know if you think that trade creates more jobs. Balanced trade with comparative advantage does create more jobs if people have various strengths. Deficit spending caused by imbalances of trade do not create jobs. That's bullshit. Okay, they do not. And the simple example for you is I'd like to just think about we could break it down this way. Our trade deficit in this country is about 3.5% of GDP. So I want you to imagine for a second that you made $100,000 as a family in your household, and every year you spent $3,500 more than the 100,000. You just kept spending $3,500 more than you made. Now, the first couple of years is going to be okay. You're like, oh, well, I can take on debt. Rates are low. Yellen told me rates are low. I can go get the money because rates are low. So anyways, you spend your extra $3,500, 1 year, then you spend another 2 years. Next thing you know, you're in year 3, you owe 10 grand. And you're like, hey, honey, we owe this $10,000, but we still only make $100,000. Why does it feel like we're not getting ahead? Like we're out $500 on interest. Rates went to 5%. And then all of a sudden, another 3 years go by. It was like, hey, we owe $20,000. What the heck is going on? How are we going to pay for our kids' college? And so this is exactly what's been happening. But it's happening to the tune of trillions of dollars, folks. We've been hoodwinked. We've been misled, and people think that there's no cost to this. It's horseshit. There is a cost to it. We need to stop it. We need to bring manufacturing back to the United States. There's about 8 to 10 million Americans that are still unemployed from last year. 8 to 10 million, folks. That's a lot of people. I'm just showing you, just the trade deficit alone is well over 3 million people. 3 million people just off of just the simple math of that, not even including the multiplier effect through the economy. And not just that, you got to remember something as well. It's not just the jobs that are created by this, it's the money. The money stays in, if the money stays in our system and it's invested in other infrastructure, it's invested in our tax base, we're just better off. I mean, it's not complicated. It doesn't need to be as complicated as they try to make it. They try to pitch it as though, there's all these things that you just don't understand. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to hear that shit. Show me why you think I don't understand. Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the math. Let's look at the lives that are impacted by your bogus decisions, you little carnival barkers. And then let's break it back down to a community level and look at how these decisions are impacting the specific community and so forth, and why the skills are not there to have this manufacturing and this other stuff on U.S. soil. Maybe this is why these corrupt politicians like to continue to put in more regulations to help their Chinese donors out. Because if you can help a country that is trying to steal your manufacturing base, and that country can bribe your officials here to put more rules and regulations into place to crowd out and choke off any competition, it's a pretty cheap way to do it, folks. Just bribe the politicians. Just put these laws up. Make it harder for your companies to operate, and we'll thank you with some donations. And then you can cater to the green beans, all the little environmentalists, and say, oh, look at what we're doing. We're cutting our carbon footprint. And since we're cutting our carbon footprint, you should donate money to us too. So we'll get the Chinese to donate to us because we're going to help stifle any manufacturing. And then we'll get the green beans to donate to us because we're good little greenies. And this is the shit that these companies, these politicians have been pulling for decades, and it's all coming to roost. And so anyways, this is the deal. They don't invest in the infrastructure. And because you like my green beans, I call all the greenies green beans. So I think the whole green argument is all crap, personally. And let me explain why I think it's crap. I've had this conversation with my wife plenty of times. I said the whole messaging thing is horseshit. If I was going to argue to have green standards, I'd say, look, I've had a hybrid vehicle before, and I have one that's not a hybrid. But the hybrid at the time, I had it in the city, and I haven't looked at the fuel efficiency lately of these cars. But the hybrid, when I would warm up the car or whatever, I actually had a heated garage, so I like the car a little warmer, even with the heated garage. Before I'd go into it, I just kind of like set the thing up, like hit one of those remote starts. So I'd go into the car and I'd go into the garage, and I didn't smell a damn thing. There was no exhaust, nothing, right? When I would go into the hybrid, and it just so happened I had a 911 Porsche for a couple of years. I had my midlife crisis early. I don't have it because I wasn't driving it enough. I got rid of it. But I had this 911 that I wanted to warm up as well, but I had to go in and turn it on. So when I turned that car on to warm it up in the garage, man, I got to tell you, it smelled horrible. The exhaust in the garage. So I had two extremes. I had this sports car, and I had this hybrid Lexus. It was an RX, 400 or whatever when it first came out. So I can smell the difference. And I said, and I talked to some of these green beans about this. I said, your arguments, you have a horrible job of communicating, because if you wanted to convince me to invest in technology or buy a different vehicle, I would do the smell test. I would set up garages, and I'd say, okay, I would like you to go into this garage. I'd like you to turn it on, and you need to sit in there for 3 minutes, and you come out of the garage, or you open up your car, and you smell all the pollution and soot. And then in the other car, you do the same thing. And you could tell very quickly that you're like, you know what? I don't even care if this stuff causes greenhouse gases. I just don't like the idea of all of these other particles that stink being in the atmosphere. And that there's got to be a better way to capture this. And that's the way I would attack the problem. If, instead of the green bees, we want you to do what we say, and we're going to make money off of these carbon credits, and we're going to hand out favors to friends that donate to our political candidates, which is happening all the time, folks. And instead, the average American consumer, the average global consumer, should just be shown through good sound logic which products create less of that stench in the environment. And that, if we took that approach and let individual consumers make the trade-offs themselves, I think we would solve some of this so-called climate stuff. First of all, I've seen conflicting data, both sides. I don't care what anybody says. The data is not conclusive. It's very inconclusive. And I don't know who to believe, because so many of our institutions have been so corrupted. And I've even said, you know what? The technology is super cheap nowadays. If supposedly all this ice is melting and everything else, then we have the means of having miniaturized cameras or drones or whatever, and all this stuff should be live streamed in real time. Show the public the truth, and you can use statistics to figure out how to map it to show this stuff in real time, that it's not being manipulated. And then, if you guys are so damn convinced that this is really happening, then there should be a way to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt to the world and to the American public in particular, since we're the ones footing the damn bill for a lot of this stuff. So anyways, with that being said, I think that's it. So I'll chime in at 4:00 later today with regards to what I guess if Yellen's going to speak. We'll see what happens with her. I'll check up on her with the news. But Powell is going to be testifying before Congress. So I'll let you know what I hear from that Carnival Barker. Carnival Barker Powell. Can't you see him with a big hat? Like he's just working the crowd at one of those carnivals. I guess that is no longer allowed. I guess it's considered inhumane to the animals, even though they get their free meals. Anyways, with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you.